I was pulling weeds from my garden bed when the phone rang that Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID showed Marcus, my son, and I smiled as I peeled off my dirt-stained gloves to answer. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, settling onto the porch steps. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded different. Careful. Like he was reading from a script he'd practiced. "I wanted to call about Ryan's wedding this Saturday. My grandson Ryan was getting married to a lovely girl named Sarah. I've been looking forward to it for months. Had already picked out my dress and bought them a beautiful crystal vase." "Yes, what about it?" I asked, though something cold was already creeping up my spine. "Well, we all talked it over, and we think it might be better if you didn't come." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't gasp or cry out. I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, watching a blue jay land on my fence post. "We all talked." I repeated quietly. "Lisa thinks the day might be too overwhelming for you. You know, with all the people and noise. She's worried about your health." Lisa. My daughter-in-law. The woman who smiled sweetly to my face while slowly freezing me out of every family gathering for the past 2 years. "My health is fine, Marcus." I know. But you've seemed a little confused lately. Forgetting things. Lisa just thinks maybe a big event like this might be too much stress." I almost laughed. Confused? I balanced my own checkbook, maintained my house, remembered every birthday and anniversary. But Lisa had been planting these seeds for months, hadn't she? Little comments about how I'd repeated a story or seemed tired. "Is this what Ryan wants?" I asked. "It's what's best for everyone, Mom. The day should be about Ryan and Sarah, not worrying about whether you're comfortable or overwhelmed." I closed my eyes. 23 years ago, when Marcus was going through his divorce and couldn't afford his own place, Ryan had lived with me for 8 months. I'd driven him to school every day, helped with homework, made his lunches. When he was scared of thunderstorms, he'd crawl into my bed. When he learned to ride a bike, I was the one running beside him in the driveway. But apparently at 25, Ryan wanted a wedding without his grandmother. "Okay," I said simply. "Okay." Marcus sounded surprised, like he'd expected me to fight. I said okay. "Mom, it's not that we don't want you there." I hung up. For a long moment, I just sat there holding the silent phone. A neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the street. The blue jay flew away. Everything looked exactly the same, but something fundamental had shifted. I walked inside and pulled Ryan's wedding invitation off my refrigerator. Elegant ivory cardstock with gold lettering. "Ryan Michael Thompson and Sarah Elizabeth Chun request your presence." I'd read it dozens of times, imagining how handsome Ryan would look in his tuxedo, how radiant Sarah would be in her dress. I tore the invitation in half and dropped it in the trash. Then I went to my kitchen and opened the freezer. Inside were 3 dozen cookies I'd made for the wedding reception. Ryan's favorite chocolate chip recipe that I'd been perfecting since he was 6 years old. I'd planned to arrange them in pretty boxes with ribbons as my contribution to the dessert table. I pulled out the containers and set them on the counter to thaw. If I wasn't welcome at the wedding, at least my cookies could be there. An hour later, I was walking up Marcus and Lisa's driveway, carrying a large box. Their house was only 6 blocks from mine. A brick colonial they bought 5 years ago with help from my late husband's life insurance money. Lisa's white Mercedes sat in the driveway next to Marcus's truck. I set the box on their front porch, rang the doorbell once, and walked away without waiting for an answer. Let them figure out what to do with 3 dozen homemade cookies from the grandmother, who wasn't invited to the celebration. That evening, my phone buzzed constantly with text messages I didn't read. I turned it face down and made myself a simple dinner of soup and toast. As I ate, I thought about all the family events I'd been gradually excluded from over the past 2 years. Ryan's birthday dinner last year. Just keeping it small this time, Mom. The family vacation to the beach house. We already booked the rooms, maybe next year. Christmas Eve at Marcus and Lisa's house. We're doing something different this year, more intimate. Each excuse had sounded reasonable on its own, but together they formed a pattern I'd been too loving or too naive to see clearly. Lisa had been methodical. She never said anything directly cruel or obviously wrong. Instead, she'd made subtle comments about my age, my energy level, my memory. She'd suggest that maybe I seemed tired, or that I'd told the same story twice, or that I might be more comfortable at home rather than dealing with crowds or late nights. And Marcus, my son who I'd raised alone after his father died when he was 12, had believed her. He'd chosen his wife's narrative over his mother's reality. I finished my soup and washed the bowl carefully, thinking about the years I'd spent sacrificing for Marcus's future. Working double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college. Putting off my own dreams to support his. Never remarrying because I didn't want him to feel displaced or unloved. Now, at 74, I was being painted as a burden. A confused old woman who might embarrass the family or cause problems at important events. The anger came slowly, like water reaching a boil. Not explosive rage, but something deeper and more dangerous. A cold, crystalline fury that settled in my chest and clarified everything. I walked to my bedroom and opened the small safe I kept in my closet. Inside were important documents, jewelry, and a folder I hadn't looked at in months. I pulled out the folder and sat on my bed, spreading papers across the comforter. My estate plan. My will. The trust I'd established 3 years ago when I'd had a minor health scare and wanted to make sure everything was in order. The trust currently held $1.8 million. Money I'd accumulated through decades of careful saving, the sale of a rental property, and my husband's life insurance payout that I'd invested wisely. Marcus was the primary beneficiary, with Ryan as secondary. Lisa's name was on there too as Marcus's spouse. They all knew about the money. Lisa especially had made comments about how nice it would be for Marcus to retire early someday, or how they could help Ryan with a house down payment when the time came. They'd been counting on this inheritance, planning their futures around money I'd worked my entire life to save. But there was something they didn't know. Something my lawyer had insisted on including when we drafted the trust, despite my protests at the time. A clause that allowed me to modify or revoke the entire trust under certain circumstances. My lawyer had called it protection against elder abuse or manipulation. I thought it was unnecessary then. Now it looked like the most important paragraph in the entire document. I read through the legal language carefully, then picked up my phone. Not to call Marcus or Ryan or Lisa. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Rachel Morrison, my financial advisor and one of the few people who'd stayed consistently in my life over the years. Rachel had been urging me for months to take a vacation, to spend some of my money on myself instead of always thinking about what I'd leave behind. She'd never liked how Marcus seemed to take my generosity for granted, though she'd been too polite to say it directly. Margaret. Rachel answered on the second ring. How are you doing? I need to make some changes to my estate plan, I said. Can we meet this week? Of course. Is everything okay? I looked at the torn wedding invitation pieces still scattered on my kitchen counter, visible through the bedroom doorway. Everything's about to be, I said. After I hung up with Rachel, I sat in my quiet house and really listened to the silence. For 2 years I'd been making excuses for Marcus and Lisa, telling myself their behavior was just stress or busy schedules or natural changes that happen as families grow and evolve. But tonight, with the wedding invitation in my trash can and Ryan's cookies delivered like a message they'd have to decode, I finally saw the situation clearly. I wasn't losing my memory. I wasn't becoming a burden. I wasn't too old or confused or overwhelming for family gatherings. I was being systematically erased. And the people doing it had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I would accept it quietly, like a good grandmother should. They'd assumed I had no power left to fight back. They were about to learn otherwise. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the darkening yard. Tomorrow I would start making changes. Real changes that couldn't be undone with apologies or explanations or promises to do better next time. But tonight, I just sat with my anger and let it settle into something useful. Something sharp and focused and completely under my control. The wedding was in 4 days. By then Marcus and Lisa would understand exactly what they'd lost, when they decided I wasn't worth including in their perfect family picture. My phone buzzed again with another text message. I glanced at it long enough to see Marcus's name, then turned the phone completely off. They wanted silence from me? They were about to get more silence than they'd bargained for. I finished my tea and went to bed, sleeping more soundly than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up and got dressed carefully, choosing my best slacks and the pearl earrings my husband had given me on our 25th anniversary. I had an appointment to keep and I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman with options. Rachel's office was in a gleaming downtown building that always made me feel slightly out of place, but today I walked through the marble lobby with purpose. She met me at the elevator, her familiar smile warming when she saw me. "Margaret, you look wonderful. Though I have to say, you sounded different on the phone yesterday." "I feel different," I said as we walked to her corner office overlooking the city. Rachel had been managing my finances for 8 years. Ever since my husband died and I'd needed help navigating life insurance payouts and investment decisions. She was probably the only person who truly understood how much I was worth, and more importantly, how hard I'd worked for every dollar. "So what changes are we talking about?" she asked, settling behind her desk with a legal pad. I pulled out the trust documents and placed them on her desk. "I want to remove Marcus and Lisa as beneficiaries." Rachel's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't look shocked. "Can you tell me what's prompted this decision?" I told her everything. The gradual exclusion from family events, the subtle suggestions that I was becoming forgetful or burdensome, and finally yesterday's phone call disinviting me from Ryan's wedding. "They've been conditioning the family to see me as a problem," I said, "making everyone believe I'm declining mentally, so they can justify pushing me aside. But they still expect to inherit my money when I die." Rachel nodded slowly. "I've seen this pattern before, unfortunately. And legally, you have every right to modify your trust. The question is whether you want this to be permanent, or if you're hoping to use it as leverage to change their behavior. I've been thinking about this all night. What's the most powerful way to handle it?" "Well," Rachel leaned back in her chair, "we could remove them entirely and redistribute everything to Ryan with conditions. Or we could transfer a significant portion to other beneficiaries while leaving them something small enough to make a point. The key is making sure they understand the consequences of their choices." "What kind of conditions for Ryan?" "We could require him to maintain a relationship with you independently of his parents, or mandate that he visit you regularly. Courts generally uphold reasonable conditions in family trusts, especially when there's documented evidence of elder manipulation." The idea was appealing, but something about it felt wrong. I don't want to force Ryan to choose between his parents and his inheritance. If he comes back to me, it needs to be because he wants to, not because I'm bribing him. Rachel made notes on her pad. "Then let's think about this differently. What would send the clearest message to Marcus and Lisa, while protecting your interests? I want them to understand that treating me like I'm invisible has consequences. Real ones, not just hurt feelings they can apologize away later." "Okay. Here's what I suggest." Rachel pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. "We remove Marcus and Lisa completely from the trust. We create a separate inheritance for Ryan, but with a condition that he must request it personally from you within 6 months of any triggering event, your death, incapacity, or your decision to activate the clause. If he doesn't make contact, his inheritance goes to other designated beneficiaries." "Who would those be?" I thought about the people who'd actually stayed in my life. My sister Dorothy in California, the Literacy Foundation I've been donating to, maybe the nursing scholarship fund at the hospital where I used to work. Perfect. Now here's the tactical part. We can make these changes immediately, but we can also create a test transaction to signal that something has shifted. A withdrawal or transfer large enough that they'll notice when they check on things. My pulse quickened. How large? What was Marcus expecting to use for Ryan's house down payment? He mentioned $50,000 last year. Then let's transfer exactly that amount to a separate account in your name only. When they discover it's missing, they'll know something has changed, but they won't know how much until they ask you directly. I like the precision of it. How quickly can this happen? The trust modifications will take about a week to finalize with all the proper documentation, but I can initiate the transfer today. By tomorrow morning, that $50,000 will be in your personal account, completely outside their reach. We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. Rachel had her legal team draft the trust modifications while I sat in her conference room, reading every line carefully. By the time we finished, Marcus and Lisa had been completely removed as beneficiaries. Ryan remained, but under strict conditions that required him to contact me personally to claim his inheritance. "There's one more thing," Rachel said as we wrapped up. "This kind of financial shift often brings out the worst in people. Are you prepared for their reaction when they realize what's happened? I've been preparing for it my whole life without knowing it, I said. Every time I chose their comfort over my own dignity, I was practicing for this moment. That evening I sat in my living room with a glass of wine, feeling calmer than I had in months. My phone had been buzzing occasionally throughout the day, but I'd left it in the kitchen, face down and ignored. Around 8 o'clock I finally decided to check the messages. 7 texts from Marcus, ranging from casual, "Hope you're doing okay, Mom," to increasingly worried, "Please call me back, I'm getting concerned." 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail I didn't listen to. I turned the phone off again and went to bed early. The next day was Thursday. The wedding was Saturday. I spent the morning in my garden, replanting some flower beds that had gotten overgrown. Physical work had always helped me think clearly, and I needed clarity for what was coming. Around noon, I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the front window I saw Marcus walking up my path, his expression tense and worried. I let him knock 3 times before I answered the door. "Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Just busy." He followed me into the living room, looking around like he was searching for evidence of some problem. "You didn't answer your phone." I was worried something had happened. My phone was off. "Why?" I sat down in my favorite armchair and gestured for him to take the couch. I needed some quiet time to think. About what? About Tuesday's conversation. About the wedding. About a lot of things. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, about the wedding, maybe we could work something out. Maybe you could come to the ceremony but skip the reception, if the crowd size is what's concerning." "It's not about crowd size, Marcus." "Then what?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was 47 years old, successful in his job as an engineering manager, father to a son he claimed to love. But sitting there in my living room, he looked like a teenager who'd been caught doing something wrong and was trying to talk his way out of consequences. "When did you start believing I was losing my memory?" "Mom, you're not losing your memory. We never said that." "Lisa did. She's been saying it for months. Little comments about how I seem confused or tired. Suggestions that maybe I'm not up for certain activities anymore." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "She's just worried about you. We both are." "Worried about what specifically?" "Well, you are getting older, and sometimes you do seem a little." "A little what?" "Forgetful. Slower. Last month you told me the same story about your neighbor's cat twice in one conversation." I stared at him. "Marcus, that wasn't forgetfulness. That was because you weren't listening the first time. You were checking your phone while I was talking, so I repeated it to make sure you heard me." His face flushed slightly. "I was listening. You were not. And instead of admitting that, you let Lisa convince you it was evidence of my mental decline." We sat in silence for a moment. I could see him trying to reconstruct that conversation in his memory, probably realizing I was right. "Mom, even if there have been some miscommunications, that doesn't change the fact that we love you and want what's best." "What's best for whom?" "For everyone. For the family." "Whose family?" He looked confused. "Our family. All of us." "Am I part of this family, Marcus?" "Of course you are." "Then why wasn't I consulted about decisions that affect me? Why did you, Lisa, and apparently Ryan all discuss whether I should be allowed at the wedding, without anyone asking what I wanted?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. "And why," I continued, "when you called to uninvite me, did you present it as a done deal? If I'm family, wouldn't the conversation have been, 'Mom, we're worried about whether the wedding might be too much for you, what do you think?' Instead of 'We've decided you shouldn't come'?" I didn't think about it that way." "No, you didn't. Because Lisa has spent 2 years training you not to think about it that way. She's been rewriting the family narrative, and you've been letting her." Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were troubled. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to think about whether the woman who raised you alone for 8 years, who worked 2 jobs to put you through college, who helped you through your divorce and co-signed loans when you couldn't qualify on your own, is really the kind of person who would embarrass you at your son's wedding." "Mom, I want you to think about whether I've ever, in your entire life, been unreliable or inappropriate or anything other than supportive of your family? No, you haven't. Then ask yourself why you believed Lisa when she suggested otherwise. He didn't have an answer for that. The wedding is in 2 days, I said. I won't be there, not because I'm not welcome, but because I choose not to be. I hope Ryan and Sarah have a beautiful day. Marcus stood up slowly. Is there anything I can do to fix this? That depends. On what? On whether you're willing to see the truth about what's been happening, or if you're going to keep protecting Lisa's version of events. He walked to the front door, then turned back. Mom, about Ryan's house fund. There it was. I'd been wondering when the money would come up. What about it? We tried to access the account yesterday to move the down payment money, and there was some kind of issue with the bank. They said the funds weren't available. I smiled pleasantly. I moved that money to a different account. Why? Because I realized I'd been making a lot of assumptions about my role in this family. I thought maybe I should reconsider some of my financial commitments until I better understand where I stand. Marcus's face went pale. Mom, Ryan is counting on that money. The house sale is supposed to close next month. Ryan never asked me for that money directly. You and Lisa have been planning to use it, but we never actually discussed it. But the trust. The trust is mine, Marcus. I can modify it whenever I choose. I watched my son's face cycle through several emotions: confusion, worry, anger, and finally something that might have been understanding. How much of it have you changed? That depends on how the next few weeks go. He left without saying goodbye, and I watched through my window as he sat in his car for several minutes before driving away, probably calling Lisa to report on our conversation. I felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, I was the one controlling the narrative. My phone rang that evening. Rachel's number. The transfer completed, she said. $50,000 is now in your personal account. The trust modifications will be finalized tomorrow. Thank you. Margaret, are you sure about this? Once those papers are signed, reversing them will be complicated. I thought about Marcus sitting in my living room, finally starting to question the story he'd been told about my declining competence, but still more worried about the money than about repairing our relationship. I'm sure, I said. That night I slept better than I had in years. Friday morning brought rain, which seemed fitting for the day before a wedding I wouldn't attend. I was having coffee on my covered porch when I saw Lisa's white Mercedes pull into my driveway. She sat there for a full minute before getting out, and I could see her checking her appearance in the rearview mirror, preparing for whatever performance she had planned. I didn't get up when she knocked. I just called out, "It's open." She walked onto the porch, her smile bright and artificial as always. "Good morning, Margaret. I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Not at all. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely." I poured her a cup from the carafe I'd brought outside, noting how she accepted it with exaggerated gratitude, as if this simple gesture proved what a thoughtful daughter-in-law she was. "I wanted to talk about tomorrow," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Marcus told me about your conversation yesterday, and I think there might be some misunderstandings we should clear up." "What kind of misunderstandings?" "Well, about the wedding invitation situation. I'm afraid Marcus didn't explain things very clearly." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a concerned, almost therapeutic tone. "The truth is, we've all been worried about you lately. Small things, nothing dramatic, but enough to make us think that a big celebration might be overwhelming." I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. "For instance, last month at Ryan's birthday dinner, you seemed a bit confused about what day it was. And at Christmas, you told the same story about your nursing days several times. We didn't want to embarrass you by pointing it out." "I see. And then there was the incident with your neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. You called me very upset, saying she'd been in your yard moving your garden decorations around. But when Marcus checked, everything was exactly where it had always been." I set down my coffee cup carefully. This was news to me. "When did I supposedly call you about Mrs. Henderson?" "About 6 weeks ago. You were quite agitated about it." "Lisa, I haven't spoken to you on the phone in over 3 months." Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Well, maybe it was Marcus you called. Sometimes details get mixed up when stories are passed along. I've never had any issues with Mrs. Henderson. She's been my neighbor for 12 years, and we get along perfectly well. Margaret, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Memory issues can be very subtle at first. I studied her face, watching the way she maintained eye contact while lying, the practiced concern in her expression. Lisa, are you suggesting I'm developing dementia? Oh no, nothing that serious. Just some normal age-related changes that we thought might make a big wedding stressful for you. And you discussed this with Ryan? We felt we had to. He loves you so much, and we didn't want him to worry. But we also didn't want him to be caught off guard if you seemed confused or upset during his special day. The picture was becoming clearer. Lisa hadn't just been excluding me from events. She'd been building a case for my mental decline, complete with fabricated incidents and reframed conversations. What exactly did you tell Ryan about my condition? Just that you've been having some memory lapses and might not be up for a big celebration. We suggested it might be kinder to everyone if you sat this one out. And Ryan agreed with this assessment? He was torn, of course, but he ultimately decided that your comfort was more important than tradition. I nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to hear that from Ryan directly. Lisa's composure slipped slightly. Well, he's very busy with last-minute wedding preparations. I'm sure he can spare 5 minutes to call his grandmother. Margaret, I don't think that's necessary. We're here now, we can work this out between us. Actually, I think it's very necessary. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to call Ryan right now and ask him to explain his concerns about my mental state. Wait. Lisa's voice sharpened. Maybe we should think about this differently. How so? She took a deep breath and I could see her switching tactics. The truth is, Ryan doesn't know about the memory issues. We've been protecting him from worrying about you. So you lied to me just now when you said you discussed it with him? I wouldn't call it lying. I was trying to spare your feelings. By telling me my grandson thinks I'm mentally unfit to attend his wedding? Lisa's mask was slipping further. Margaret, you're twisting my words. Am I? Let me see if I understand correctly. You've been telling Marcus that I'm showing signs of memory loss, citing incidents that either didn't happen or didn't happen the way you described them. You used these fabricated concerns to convince him that I shouldn't attend Ryan's wedding. But you didn't actually discuss any of this with Ryan because you knew he wouldn't believe it. That's not. She started then stopped. Which part isn't accurate? Lisa stood up abruptly. I think you're getting upset, and when you're upset you tend to misinterpret things. Maybe we should continue this conversation when you're calmer. I'm perfectly calm. And my interpretation seems quite clear. Margaret, I'm trying to help you. We all are. But if you're going to be hostile and paranoid. Paranoid about what? About family members who love you and are trying to look out for your best interests. I smiled. Lisa, my best interest would be attending my grandson's wedding and maintaining my relationships with my family. Your interests seem to be keeping me away from family events while ensuring I continue to pay for them. Her face flushed. I don't know what you mean by that. Marcus mentioned yesterday that there was an issue accessing Ryan's house fund. That's completely separate from. Is it? You want me out of the family picture, but you still want my money in it. Lisa gathered her purse and stood. I can see you're determined to misunderstand everything I've said. I came here to try to work things out, but you're clearly not interested in being reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. I'm just not being manipulable anymore. She walked to the porch steps then turned back. You know, Marcus was right about you becoming difficult. I hope for everyone's sake that you reconsider your attitude before it's too late. After she left, I sat on the porch for a long time, replaying the conversation. Lisa had revealed more than she'd intended. The fabricated incidents, the lies about what Ryan had been told, the way she tried to gaslight me about my own memories. It painted a picture of systematic manipulation that went far beyond what I'd initially suspected. Around noon my phone rang. Ryan's name appeared on the screen. Hi, Grandma. Hello, sweetheart. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Nervous but excited. Listen, Dad told me there was some confusion about the wedding invitation. What kind of confusion? He said you might not be feeling up to coming, but he wasn't very clear about why. I wanted to call and tell you that I really want you there. My heart lifted slightly. Do you? Or do you think I might be too much trouble? Too much trouble? Grandma, what are you talking about? Ryan, has anyone discussed concerns about my memory or mental state with you? There was a pause. No. Should they have? According to Lisa, yes. She just told me that you all decided I might be too confused or overwhelmed to handle a wedding. That's crazy. You're sharper than most people half your age. Who said you were confused? I felt a mixture of relief and fury. Your stepmother has been telling your father that I'm showing signs of memory loss. She claims you were worried about me being inappropriate or embarrassing at your wedding. That's complete bullshit. Sorry, excuse my language, but that's ridiculous. I never said anything like that. So you weren't involved in the decision to uninvite me? Uninvite you? Grandma, what's going on? Dad just told me you might not feel well enough to come. I explained Tuesday's phone call, Marcus's exact words, and Lisa's visit that morning. Ryan was quiet for a long time. I don't understand, he said finally. Why would Lisa say all that? I think you should ask her that question directly. I will. But Grandma, please, I want you at my wedding. I don't care what anyone else thinks or says. Will you come? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Ryan, I appreciate you calling. I really do. But I won't be there tomorrow. Because of Lisa? Because I need to understand what's been happening in this family before I can decide how much of it I want to be part of. What do you mean? I mean that for 2 years I've been gradually excluded from family events based on lies about my mental condition. Your father believed those lies without questioning them. And until 20 minutes ago, I was led to believe that you believed them too. But I don't. I never did. I know that now. But the fact that this elaborate deception was possible tells me something important about how this family operates. Ryan was quiet again. What can I do to fix this? Talk to your father and stepmother. Find out why they thought it was acceptable to manipulate our relationship. And then decide for yourself whether you want to be part of a family that operates this way. Grandma. I love you, Ryan. I always will. But love isn't enough anymore. Trust has to be earned back. After I hung up, I felt emotionally drained but clearer than I had in months. Ryan's reaction had confirmed what I'd suspected. He'd been manipulated just as much as I had. That evening, I was reading in my living room when I heard raised voices from the direction of Marcus and Lisa's house. Their kitchen window faced my backyard, and on quiet nights, sound carried further than they probably realized. I couldn't make out specific words, but the tone was unmistakably an argument. It went on for nearly an hour. My phone rang just after 9 o'clock. Marcus. Mom, we need to talk. About what? About Lisa. About everything. I think I've been an idiot. What happened? Ryan confronted Lisa about what she told you. He recorded the conversation. I sat up straighter. Recorded it. He didn't tell her he was recording. She said some things. Things about you that were completely different from what she told me. Such as, she admitted she made up the incidents about your memory. She said she had to do something to get you out of the picture because you were too involved in our lives. Too involved how? She said you acted like you were still the matriarch of the family, like your opinion mattered more than hers. She said she couldn't build her own family culture with you constantly interfering. I almost laughed. Interfering by what? Bringing cookies to birthday parties? Offering to help with holiday dinners? That's what I said. But she claimed you were undermining her authority as Ryan's stepmother and my wife. And you believed this? There was a long pause. I wanted to believe her version was an exaggeration. But Mom, she said things tonight that I can't unhear. What kind of things? She said you were a narcissist who used guilt and money to control people. She said the family would be healthier without your toxic influence. She said she was protecting Ryan from your manipulation. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. And what do you think, Marcus? I think I've been married to someone I don't really know. And I think I've been a terrible son. You've been a son who wanted to believe the best about his wife. That's not terrible, it's human. Mom, about the money. Ryan told me you moved it out of the trust. I did. All of it. Does that matter to you? Another long pause. It matters because I realize now that we never actually talked about any of it. We just assumed we knew what you wanted. What I wanted was to be treated like family while I was alive, not just remembered as an ATM after I died. I know. I see that now. Do you really? Or are you saying what you think I want to hear because you're worried about the inheritance? He started to protest, then stopped. I don't know how to prove to you that it's not about the money. You can't prove it, Marcus. You can only show it through your actions over time. What if it's too late for that? I looked around my quiet living room, at the photos of family gatherings where I'd been welcome, at the comfortable life I'd built for myself. Time will tell, I said and hung up. The wedding was tomorrow. By this time next week, Ryan would be married and back from his honeymoon. Marcus would have to decide whether his loyalty belonged to his mother or his wife. And I would know exactly where I stood with the family I'd spent my life building. For the first time in months, I felt like I was the one writing the story instead of being written out of it. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that makes everything look muted and uncertain. I woke early and made myself a proper breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit. The kind of meal I used to make for Marcus when he was young and needed extra energy for big days. Today was Ryan's wedding day, and I would spend it alone by choice rather than excluded by manipulation. Around 10 o'clock, I heard cars pulling into driveways up and down the street as people prepared for the celebration. I imagined Sarah getting her hair done, Ryan adjusting his tie, Lisa orchestrating everything with her usual controlling precision. The thought didn't make me sad anymore. It made me determined. My phone rang just before noon. Rachel's number. The final trust documents are ready for your signature, she said. Are you still certain about these changes? More certain than I've ever been about anything. All right. I'll bring them by this afternoon. Margaret, I have to ask, are you prepared for the long-term consequences of this decision? You mean, am I prepared to spend my remaining years with a family that actually wants me around instead of one that tolerates me for my bank account? Rachel laughed softly. When you put it that way, it sounds like the smartest decision you could make. After lunch, I sat at my kitchen table with Rachel while she explained each document one final time. The trust now designated my sister Dorothy in California as the primary beneficiary, with substantial donations to the Literacy Foundation and Nursing Scholarship Fund I'd supported for years. Ryan remained as a conditional beneficiary, but only if he maintained a genuine relationship with me, independent of his parents' influence. Marcus and Lisa had been removed entirely. Once you sign these, reversing the changes will require a complete legal review and new documentation, Rachel warned. Are you absolutely sure? I thought about Lisa sitting on my porch yesterday, calmly lying about fabricated incidents while painting me as mentally unstable. I thought about Marcus believing those lies without question for 2 years. I thought about the systematic exclusion from family events while they continued planning to inherit my money. I'm sure. I signed my name on each document, my handwriting steady and clear. No confusion, no memory lapses, no signs of the mental decline Lisa had been so carefully constructing. Rachel gathered the papers and put them in her briefcase. It's done. As of now, the new trust provisions are legally binding. That evening, I was reading in my living room when I heard a car door slam outside. Through my front window, I saw Marcus walking up my path, still wearing his wedding suit but with his tie loosened and his hair disheveled. He looked exhausted. I opened the door before he could knock. How was the wedding? Can I come in? I stepped aside and he walked into the living room, then just stood there for a moment like he didn't know what to do with himself. It was beautiful, he said finally. Ryan looked so happy. Sarah was radiant. Everything went perfectly. I'm glad. You should have been there. Should I have? According to your wife, I would have been confused and embarrassing. Marcus sat down heavily on my couch. Mom, I need to tell you something. Lisa and we're separating. I sat across from him, studying his face. Because of what happened with Ryan's recording? Because of a lot of things that recording made me finally see clearly. He rubbed his temples. She wasn't just lying about you. She's been lying about everything for years. What do you mean? After Ryan played me that recording, I started thinking about other things that never quite made sense. Conversations where she claimed you'd said things that didn't sound like you. Times when she told me you declined invitations that I thought you'd want to accept. Such as, Remember my promotion celebration last year? Lisa said you told her you weren't feeling well enough to come. But you never said that to me directly. I remembered that night. I'd waited for an invitation that never came, then saw photos on social media of the celebration I hadn't known was happening. I was never invited, Marcus. His face crumpled slightly. I know that now. She intercepted the conversation entirely. Told me she'd talked to you and you weren't up for it, then never contacted you at all. What else? Your birthday dinner 2 years ago. She said you wanted to keep it small and quiet, just immediate family. But I found the restaurant reservation in her email. She'd originally booked a table for 12 people, then changed it to 6 without telling me. The pieces were clicking into place. She canceled the invitations to Dorothy and my friends. Yes. And then she made it seem like it was your choice to have a smaller celebration. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. How long has this been going on? I think since shortly after we got married. Maybe even before. Marcus looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, I don't know how to apologize for this. I don't know how to make it right. You can't make it right, Marcus. But you can stop making it worse. What does that mean? It means deciding whether you're going to keep protecting Lisa's version of reality or start living in the actual world. I told her I want a divorce. I studied his face carefully. Because I changed the trust? No. Because I realized I've been married to someone who's been systematically destroying my relationship with my mother for years. Because when Ryan confronted her, instead of apologizing or trying to explain, she doubled down and said she'd do it again because you needed to be put in your place. She said that. She said you were getting too old to be the center of attention, and it was time for the younger generation to take over. She said she was doing what was best for everyone by managing your involvement in family events. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Managing my involvement in my own family. I know how it sounds. I know how it's always sounded, but I kept telling myself she was just being protective or concerned. I didn't want to believe my wife was that manipulative. And now I'm wondering what other relationships she's interfered with. What other decisions she's made for me without my knowledge. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood settling into evening, dogs barking, lawn mowers running, the normal sounds of families living their lives. Marcus, I need to tell you something. He looked up. I've removed you from the trust. Permanently. His face didn't change much, which told me he'd been expecting this. I figured as much. You don't seem surprised. After everything that's happened, I'd probably do the same thing. This isn't punishment exactly. It's protection. Protection from what? From thinking you can treat someone badly and still benefit from their generosity. From assuming that DNA gives you unlimited chances to hurt people without consequences. Marcus nodded slowly. What about Ryan? Ryan is still included, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? He has to maintain a real relationship with me, not managed by you or Lisa or anyone else. If he wants his inheritance, he has to earn it by being a genuine grandson. That seems fair. Do you really think so? Or are you saying what you think I want to hear? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Honestly, part of me is angry. Part of me thinks this is extreme. But the bigger part of me knows I have no right to be angry about anything. I let my wife erase you from our family, and I did it so gradually that I convinced myself it was normal. What happens now? Now I try to figure out how to rebuild a relationship with my son without his stepmother's interference. And I try to become the kind of person who deserves a second chance with his mother. And if you can't become that person, then I guess I live with the consequences of my choices. I looked at my son, seeing both the little boy I'd raised alone and the man who disappointed me so deeply. Marcus, I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money. It's about trust. And trust, once broken this completely, may never be fully reparable. I know. You can't apologize your way out of this. You can't make grand gestures or promises. You can only show me through consistent actions over time, whether you've actually changed or whether you're just sorry you got caught. How long will that take? I don't know. Maybe years. Maybe never. Marcus stood up slowly. I should go. Ryan and Sarah are coming by later to thank me for everything. And I need to figure out how to explain why you weren't there without making Lisa look like the villain. Lisa made herself look like the villain. You don't need to protect her anymore. I know. It's hard to break the habit. After he left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about the strange turn my life had taken. This morning I'd been a grandmother excluded from her family's most important celebration. Tonight I was a woman who'd reclaimed her power and rewritten the rules of engagement. Around 9 o'clock there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Ryan and Sarah, still in their wedding clothes but looking tired and happy. "Grandma," Ryan said, "can we come in?" I stepped aside and they entered, Sarah hanging back slightly as if she wasn't sure of her welcome. "Congratulations," I said. "I heard it was a beautiful ceremony." "It would have been better with you there," Ryan said. Sarah stepped forward. "Mrs. Williams, I want you to know that I had no idea what was happening. If I'd known Lisa was lying about you, I would have insisted you be included in everything." I smiled at her. "Thank you, dear. And please call me Margaret." We sat in the living room and I offered them tea or coffee but they declined. "Grandma, Dad told me about the divorce," Ryan said. "I'm sorry this whole situation has torn the family apart." "The family was already torn apart, sweetheart. It's just visible now. What can I do to fix things?" I looked at my grandson, this young man I'd helped raise, who'd been manipulated just as much as I had been. "You can't fix things, Ryan. But you can decide what kind of relationship you want with me going forward." "I want the same relationship we've always had." "That's not possible anymore." "Why not?" "Because the relationship we had was built on the assumption that we were both part of the same family with the same values and priorities. Now I know that's not true." Sarah took Ryan's hand. "What would a new relationship look like?" I appreciated her directness. "It would be based on honesty and mutual respect. It would mean that you communicate with me directly instead of through other family members. It would mean that you make your own decisions about our relationship, instead of letting other people influence those decisions." "I can do that," Ryan said. "It would also mean accepting that your father is no longer part of my life in any meaningful way. I don't know if that will change, but for now that's the reality." Ryan looked troubled. "You're really cutting him off completely?" "I'm protecting myself from further manipulation. If your father wants to rebuild our relationship, he's going to have to prove he's changed. And that's going to take time." "What about the money?" Sarah asked quietly. "Ryan told me about the trust changes." I smiled at her again. "You're very direct. I like that. I just want to understand the situation. The money is still available to Ryan, but with conditions. He has to maintain a genuine relationship with me, not because he's required to, but because he chooses to." "What does genuine mean?" "It means visits that aren't prompted by holidays or obligations. It means phone calls that aren't about asking for favors. It means including me in your lives because you want me there, not because you feel guilty if you don't." Ryan and Sarah exchanged a look. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" Ryan said. "Of course. Are you lonely? Living here by yourself, not talking to Dad?" I thought about the question seriously. I'm alone more than I was before. But I'm not lonely. Loneliness comes from being around people who don't really see you or value you. Solitude comes from choosing your own company over bad company. And you prefer solitude? Right now, yes. But that doesn't mean I'm closed off to new relationships or repaired old ones. It just means I'm not willing to accept crumbs anymore. They stayed for another hour, telling me about the wedding, about their honeymoon plans, about Sarah's new job and Ryan's promotion at work. Normal family conversation, the kind I'd been missing without realizing it. As they prepared to leave, Sarah hugged me, the first genuine affection I'd received from anyone in the family in months. "Margaret, I want you to know that Lisa doesn't speak for me. Whatever relationship you and Ryan build, I want to be part of it." "I'd like that very much." After they left, I cleaned up the coffee cups and put away the photo albums we'd looked through. The house felt different somehow, not empty but peaceful. 6 months later, I was working in my garden when Ryan's car pulled into the driveway. He'd been coming by every other week since the wedding, sometimes with Sarah, sometimes alone. Today he was alone and he looked troubled. "What's wrong?" I asked, pulling off my gardening gloves. "Dad wants to see you." "Oh." He's been going to therapy, individual counseling, and some kind of program for people in manipulative relationships. He asked me to ask if you'd be willing to meet with him. What do you think I should do? Ryan sat down on my porch steps. I think that's entirely up to you, but I will say that he seems different, more aware of what actually happened, less defensive about Lisa. They're divorced now? Finalized last month. She moved back to her hometown. Dad says he's still processing how much of his life she controlled without him realizing it. I sat beside him on the steps. Ryan, I need you to understand something. Whether or not I talk to your father doesn't affect our relationship. You don't have to be the messenger or the mediator. I know, but I miss having my whole family together. Sweetheart, we were never all together. We were just all pretending to be together while one person pulled the strings. I know that now, but maybe we could actually be together this time. I looked at my grandson, this young man who'd chosen truth over comfort, who'd been visiting me regularly without any prompting from his father, who'd built his own relationship with me based on genuine affection rather than obligation. Tell your father I'll meet with him, I said. But here in my house on my terms. Really? Really? But Ryan, you need to understand that forgiveness and trust are different things. I might be able to forgive your father, but trusting him again will depend entirely on his actions, not his words. I understand. And if the meeting doesn't go well, if he's still making excuses or trying to minimize what happened, then it ends there. I won't put myself through repeated disappointments. Fair enough. That evening, I called Rachel and told her about Ryan's request. Are you sure you're ready for this? She asked. I'm ready to find out if Marcus is ready for it. The trust changes remain in place? For now, yes. If Marcus proves over time that he's genuinely changed, we can discuss modifications. But the burden of proof is on him, not me. Good. You've worked too hard to reclaim your power to give it away easily. As I hung up the phone, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Confused, hurt, gradually being erased from her own family's story. That woman would have accepted any apology, made any excuse, forgiven any transgression just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was someone who knew her own worth, who demanded to be treated with respect, who understood that love without boundaries isn't love at all. Whether Marcus could meet me in this new reality remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, the outcome didn't depend on his choices alone. It depended on mine too. And I finally trusted myself to make the right ones.